Okay, so let me change the view here. So what's going to happen is let me see here. Get the speaker view. Okay, so um let's just talk about who you are, where you grew up, things of that nature.
Okay. My name is Joseph Robinson. I go by Joe, so Joe Robinson. In the context of um, this meeting, I'm Donald Grant's eldest sibling. I'm the oldest of five. Donald's the next to the youngest sibling. But anyway, grew up in East New York. I was born April 17, 1970. My mom, I grew up in Brooklyn, different parts of Brooklyn. And my father, he also passed away. My mom passed away 2 years ago. My father passed away in 2014. He was from Trinidad, and they met many, many years ago. When she was basically still a teenager, he was a young adult and all this other stuff, right? But anyway, so yeah, we grew up in East New York, Brooklyn, in both the projects and what they call tenement buildings, like standalone brick houses, usually like that. And it was better when we were in the tenement buildings. Once we moved to the projects, I mean, it became home and I adapted, but it was rough, like I imagine most housing projects are. So yeah, like I said, I was born in 70. Was a good student, A student throughout school, had aspirations of being an airline pilot. My father actually was a pilot. And so not an airline pilot, but he flew in the military. He was both in the Army and the Air Force. And then for many years, he did what they call it, the National Guards or something like that. So I wanted to follow in his footsteps, even though he uh, was not in my life most of the time. When he was around, he showed me his flight logs. Like when I would stay at his house, we lived in Brooklyn. Like I said, he lived in Queens in a house, so it's very different. It's like two different worlds basically. But I spent 99.9% of my life with my mom. I spent every so often I would spend a weekend with my dad, but seldom. But he made an impression. It's a very impressive black man, a pilot, coming up that back then. So that's what I wanted to be. And so I went to school for that. There was a public high school that had a special flight program. I actually took some flight lessons when I was 16 years old. It was rare. It was two schools in New York City, one in Manhattan, another one in Queens that would go out to Farmingdale University in Long Island, take flying lessons. But it was around that time when my life turned upside down. In 1985, I was 15 at the time. It was at the beginning of the crack era. It just swept New York City by storm. Prior to that, the most my mother did, and I'm bringing my mother up because I think there's a connection between, what Donald's situation is, not a direct with it, and I myself spent many years in prison, and there's a connection. And so in 1985, I was 10th grade high school, and my mother succumbed to crack cocaine addiction. Prior to that, she was, for me at least, and I think all my siblings were in different ways, but for me, as the oldest, my mother doted on me. So I was like everything, and she instilled a lot of good confidence in me, always told me how much she loved me and, believed in me, and I was going to be a pilot, and that stuff really fueled me, really. And, but once she became addicted, the family imploded. I mean, literally, we are still nearly 40 years later dealing with the ramifications of the crack cocaine era.
So Joe, let
And
me let me let me interrupt you real quick. I'm sorry. Can you tilt the laptop down? Just look other way, other way.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. And
Okay, so.
and yeah, and that light is kind of blowing you out a little bit.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Let me,
Let me see. I can move it. Yeah.
I want to make sure people can see you and everything, bro.
Yeah, I got you. Let me. I'll move it over here. The plug is over there. That's the only reason why I put
Okay.
it. It's a little better.
Yeah. That's a lot better, man. Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. So you were talking about your mother and and everything.
Yeah. So the crack cocaine. So shortly thereafter, I can. I'm not blaming everything on it. It was the whole. The whole environment. So there was a macro, but on a smaller level in terms of the family, we we fell apart. Shortly thereafter, I started hanging out in the streets, hanging out with most, neighborhood guys, committing petty crimes. I'm not blaming all on my mother. I think it was the time, the environment, but the truth is that she was not the mother that she used to be. That she did that crack thing is serious. I mean, it really just, I think, kind of robbed a lot of women of that maternal instincts, and it just was different. And so I ended up getting arrested at some point in early 1987. I did 4 months for robbery or acting in concert. It was three of us. I think three of us. We had three of us. I was the only one I got caught. And I ended up spending 4 months on the notorious Rikers Island, here by Rikers Island. It was terrible. It was like a war zone every single day. But anyway, I survived it. Took my GED while I was there because I was always a good student. So I passed it the first time. Initially was thinking about going to college right away, but decided not to, and then worked a little bit from like 87 to 88. January 89, I ended up going to college because I wanted to be a pilot. And they didn't have a flight program at the school that I originally went to, but or eventually went to, I meant to say. But I think they had what they call the AMPs, like an airframe and power plant program, right? And so I thought maybe I would go that route and as a detour and then go into flying. But anyway, so while I was in school, my mother was still abusing drugs. My siblings were in New York City. I was upstate New York. My siblings were in the city with my mom, well, living with my grandmother, really, because my mom wasn't around. And it was during that time that Donald, in particular, Donald and our baby brother, Lennox, I found this out many years later, and it makes me feel awful, but they were fending for themselves, like on the streets at 9, 10 years old, stuff like that. Weren't even teenagers. We literally had to fend for themselves. So many of us lived in a house, the same house, same 3-bedroom apartment. I don't know, it was 20 of us, 20, I don't even know. Literally cousins, my grandmother, some of her kids and their kids. It was really crazy. But that was home. It was familiar. That was home. And again, while I was away in college, and then the second semester when I went to school, and I was very unfocused. I was young and just did not focus at all once I went to college. But so my second semester, I ended up getting my then girlfriend, who became my son's mother, pregnant. And so, I'm saying those for a reason, because Donald and I and my other siblings have talked about that era. We can't escape it. It's like prison. It's like a whole bunch of traumatic experiences. It's like you can't escape the crack era and the ramifications of it, right? And especially you got to remember too, that was when the AIDS epidemic was at its height too. So we got both of these things going on. It was crazy all over. And I'm sure not just in New York City, all over the place, Black and brown communities. And I couldn't understand it. I'm 15, 16, 17. I'm just in it. I just like, oh, wow, this shit is crazy. You could feel the difference when you see 19, like myself later, 18, 19-year-olds driving around with cars, the jury. We didn't see that before that. Where you get that type of money from? I mean, just think, I'm just being honest, right? But now, shit, when I was 19, 20, I was making thousands of dollars a day, every day, you know what I'm saying? Or just on average, you know what I'm saying? And it's hard, so it became an addictive lifestyle. But anyway, so while I was away in college and then got my girlfriend pregnant, started spending time with her because I was like, oh, that was who I loved, and I say that because my siblings, yeah, I think they, including Donna, holds. He says no, but it holds that against me. Like I like chose her over them, and I neglected them, abandoned them. So that's an issue that that is still, I think, there. He said that's not but the case, but I think him and especially our youngest brother. Uh, and so Donald grew up in the midst of that, not as a teenager. He was not even a teenager. When I learned of my mother's addiction, I was 15. He had to be 10. What do you know at 10 years old? You just see your mom, we think our parents are the closest thing to God. And then all of a sudden you just see them, they've abandoned you or, neglecting you, not because, you're confused. You're confused as a 10-year-old. So anyway, I've started, and this is no self-promotion, I'm just contextualizing. I have a memoir that's, I had a literary agent, and I gotta look for another one. But in it, in the process, I have a 300 something page memoir, written, edited, everything, right? And it's about this era and how it's affected us, right? And my family and the Black and Brown community on a larger scale. But I bring that up because I was incarcerated at the time when I started. It was 10 years ago when I started writing. It's now 11. It was 2011 when I started writing the memoir. It took me several years to go with several edits. But I was able to get vignettes from Donald, from Lennox, from Giselle, from Sean, and even from my mother. Interviews. How did you become addicted? What did you feel and think when, about the kid? I mean, I went there with her. I had the help of my wife, who's a, New York Times. She retired as a senior editor. So she, I would call from the prison phone, call my wife, and she'd call the, you're not supposed to do it, but then she'd call my mother. So we'd have a three-way conference call, and we'd be peppering her with questions about the era. Not like, like she was other, interrogated, but and she was happy, not happy, but yeah, she maybe relieved, not happy, but relieved to talk about some of that stuff, especially with her oldest son. I've had, oldest child. I didn't believe that. So a lot of stuff came out. That's my point. That's the reason why I mentioned the memoir. A lot of stuff came out that I had no clue. No, I mean, I didn't have a clue because I guess I was in a bubble, to be honest, and learned so much about the traumas that all of them went through, right? I mean, I went through my share of stuff, right? But I think mine, and I've said this, on mine pales in comparison to my sister Giselle, to Donald, and to Lennox. Sean was, he's all right, so to speak, like I was fine. But we all got separated. So I was an adult, a young adult. I was in college. I'm not sure, to be honest, what the hell Sean was, excuse my language, what Sean was into. But Giselle, the middle child, and Donald, the next to the youngest, and then Lennox, the baby, they were, they, like I said, going through the memoir, I really found out a lot. They were picked up because my mother wasn't at the house and they weren't going to school. I learned all this while I'm away, like, living my life, figuring that they're okay because there's so many people in the house. So they were picked up by what they called then BCW, Bureau of Child Welfare, right? So these are people who take your kids if you ain't taking care of your kids. And they came and got my siblings. It was heart-wrenching. I read each of their stories and they each talked about it, obviously from their vantage point, what that experience is so raw and real. And then Donald talked about, and he's talked about this on the phone. I couldn't believe it when I read it. He talked about there not being enough food in the house, so the young boys, including himself and some of our cousins, male, they had defended. Our grandmother said, it's not enough food. There's only enough for the girls. I don't know how I got to figure it out, right? So they would pack bags in supermarkets, all the stuff like that. Sometimes would get robbed because they was little kids. I'm learning all this later. I didn't know this stuff, right? And when they couldn't find nothing to eat, Donald talked about picking up chewing gum from the floor. And seriously, he has talked about this on the phone, but when I first read in his piece, I said, this can't be true. He's talked about it within the last couple of weeks. Like when he reflects on his life, he just goes there. So I just listen. And it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. People think, oh, this is the Big Apple. This is New York City. It's got to be, okay. They got the saying, if you live here, you live anywhere. It's that. I mean, that was his life. It was just crazy. And that just led him gradually to a life. I don't know if it was crime all the time, but he's been institutionalized most of his life since he was a kid. The last time I saw him, now this is really crazy. Prior to visiting Donald last month, the last time I saw my baby brother, he's not the baby, but my little brother, was in 1991.
Wow.
30 years. Wow. 30 years. I was 21. Now I'm 51, about to be 52. He was like 15. He just turned 46. And that is because of, again, not take full responsibility for my actions, but for my crime, right? Which I'm not going to get into the details, cost me, and well, I'm not going to say what it cost me, but anyway, I ended up spending 25 years. 25 years
wow.
in prison.
That's half of your life.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I managed to come out a lot better than I went in. It wasn't because of the Department of Corrections, but my point is, and then when I got out, I was on supervision. So you can't just get up and go and say, I'm going to visit. So I had to wait till I was off. It took me 3 years to get off parole. They discharged me, so I don't have parole, thank God. And then COVID hit 2 years ago. You know what I'm saying? So there's 5 years. So it's just if I had no restrictions on parole, I would have saw them, in the first couple of months of being home. I would have been out there. 30 years. 30 years. It's unbelievable. This is all surreal, man.
Wow.
This is all surreal. I haven't hugged them, I haven't touched them. When I went to see him, there's no what do you call it? Contact visit. Yeah, it's crazy. It is crazy. We're touching glass. I mean, this is inhumane. Anyway, man, this is crazy, and it's infuriating too. You know what I'm saying? It's infuriating. So yeah.
Yeah. So wow, man, that's just wow. I don't know what to say to that, man. One thing, technical thing, is there another light in the room there? Is there another that you could turn on?
I have a let's see if I could do this. Well, I could try this. Yeah, lighting is I know this is not gonna work. That's too bright.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I can go in another room. Let me see. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No. It's cool. I just wanted to see. I just want people to be able to see your face and everything. That's all.
Just let me see. Right. I see what you're saying. Let me see something. This is not good either, right? It's very bright.
But that's better than what we had. I can see your face a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a portrait of me and my wife in the background.
Oh, cool, man.
I'm in the bedroom now.
All right. And if you can tilt it down just a little bit, and then we'll be good, man.
All right. Tilt it down.
Yeah. Okay. So I can see a little bit up, so I'm not cutting you off your head. Right there. A little bit up, a little bit more. All right, right there. There we go. Good. So, so what are some of your memories of Donald? I know, there was a lot of time that you weren't there, But what are some of your memories of him, your fondest memories of him? Did you guys play a lot? Did you do stuff? I mean, I know there's a big age difference, but you know.
Right. So that played a big part. So it's a lot of stuff we didn't do, but it's not like we had no connection. One of the things when we what that I did, I forgot when I started, but because I was the oldest and my mom would work and then she would be on public assistance and she would work. That's my memory of the early childhood. I would end up being a babysitter, so I had to babysit my siblings. And what I used to do was play teacher, literally play teacher, because I was, like I said, a good student, and I wanted my siblings to also be good students. And so I would literally have like it's funny now, but I would have them like give me their books and materials, see what grade they were on, like if Donna was in third grade, then I'd look at his stuff and I'd give them assignments, like actually like play teacher for and try to meet each of their needs, meet them where they're at. So that was a fun. What was interesting that I remember, like I said, I wanted to be a pilot. I think Sean wanted to be, I don't know, either a mechanic or specific an airline, like an airplane mechanic. That's what he said. I think that's what he said. Giselle, I think, wanted to be a teacher. Donald, I think he said he wanted to be a store owner or something like that. I thought that was interesting. So I didn't want to. I think I may have said, you sure, like, you don't want to think a little bigger, like, what I'm saying? But I think that's because his father, we have different fathers. So Donald Sr. didn't he didn't own a store, but I think he knew people who owned the store, like in Brownsville section of Brooklyn. So he just went by, what he saw, and then Lennox wanted to be, I think, a lawyer or something like that. And he is very smart. So yeah, it's interesting. All of us, so we were all over the place in terms of what our aspirations were.
Yeah.
But I remember Donald being what I would say mischievous. I remember when we lived on Bradford. This before we moved, like really lived in the pink houses, the projects. We lived in the tenement building at 614 Bradford Street. That was the address. And Sean and I shared a bedroom. My mother had her own room, and Donald, Lennox, and Giselle shared the biggest room. Right, Giselle had her own bed, and then the boys had a bunk bed, Donald and Lennox. Right, and so again, Sean and I shared a room, and I remember I forgot which toy it was, but I had one of my toys. Man, and we've talked about this too. And I had my toy up in the closet. Now he's not supposed to be in my room. But Donald is Donald, and he's mischievous and wants to find out stuff or whatever. And apparently, while we weren't there, he tried to get my whatever toy it was, and climbed up in the closet, and it fell down. Like the shelf fell down,
Wow.
and it dislocated his shoulder.
Whoa.
Yeah, he had a sling for some while. Got the ass whooping first, you know what I'm saying? Which is,
Of course.
yeah, got that was first. And then, yeah. So he's still talking about he's like, yo, you remember when I took? I said, no, you remember. I don't gotta remember you the one that got that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but yeah, so he was another memory was, and we talked about this too. I remember one time in particular, but I think it happened maybe 2 or 3 times, maybe twice. But at one time in particular, I was in I think I was in 5th or 6th grade, and Donald was in school as well. He was in kindergarten, I think. So I remember this was crazy. I remember my name being called on a PA system, telling me to come downstairs and get my brother Donald. This is crazy. So this had to be in maybe 81 or something like that, 81, 82. So I go downstairs, get Donald. He's like grinning, smiling, whatever like that. And they basically said that I don't know if it was that time or another time, but at one of those times, he got I don't think he got suspended then, but he grabbed he grabbed a chair and swung it at the teacher. I think he broke her damn hand. Yeah.
Wow.
This is as a kid.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. So I don't know the circumstances to this day. I'm gonna ask him. I don't know if I'm gonna ask him. I don't know. But because I don't want to trigger him. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. Maybe it's just he might laugh. Who knows? I don't know. But my point is, I was always curious why what would make him do that. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, so I had to go downstairs to get him, bring him upstairs to my class because it wasn't the end of the eighth grade, the eighth period. So I couldn't just go home. They was like, no, you can just take him up to your class. So he's in the back of class. All my friends like, oh, he's cute. You know, all the stuff. So he's smiling, all eyes on him and stuff. And so I whispered in his ear, so you know when you go home, you getting an ass whooping, right? You laughing now. You know what I'm saying? You better enjoy this because you go. And sure enough, yeah, and now on a sadder note, and it's related, so I think I need to bring it up now, is Donald, hands down, got the worst ass whoopings of all of us. And when I say worse, it wasn't like people were comparing. In my opinion, his just stood out. I don't know why. Literally, he said that to not today, but within the last week or two. You know what I'm saying? He got it was I'm just being honest. I love my mom. It was cruel. I mean, it's cruel. I don't know why to this day. And now, like now that I know, because we would always say, or I would always say, oh, Donald's just bad, not knowing that he had mental health issues. There was no name for that stuff, and he wasn't, like it wasn't obvious. Something is off, but it wasn't like how somebody might have some serious like extreme. It wasn't extreme, put it that way. But you see the glare in his eye, certain look, something different. Things always bad, like would do stuff. It's almost like he's testing the waters and something like that. I wasn't an angel. I got my share of, weapons, so I got, but not as many, not even nearly as many. And I remember one time, and probably a couple times, but one time in particular, and we talked about this, me and my sibling, meaning me, Sean, and Giselle. I remember this was crazy. We lived, like I said, on Bradford in a tenement building. And whatever Donald did or was accused of doing, my mother whipped him, whipped him with, I don't know what she whipped him with, but she whipped him. And then I remember when we first came in the apartment, on the left, there was a closet, like a cupboard or something like that, so you could put whatever. It's a small, tiny little closet. After she whipped him, told him, get in the closet, and had him go in the closet in the dark. And you could tell he was scared, like he's in the dark, scared and traumatized. I mean, what type of rejection? That must feel like extreme rejection. Go in the closet in the dark. She didn't do that to any of us. I don't know why. I wish I could ask. I would, if she was alive, I would really talk about why she beat down or the way she beat down. I mean, it was crazy. You hear, and I don't mean a stereotype, but you hear some uh female, parents, and he say, oh, they take it out on the kid that looks like or acts like the father, for example. I don't know why. I don't know if she couldn't deal with the mental health because they didn't have a name for it then. What I surmise is that was a big part of it. Like she didn't maybe had to learn it from her parents, or people that that's how if a child is bad, then you like really beat the hell out of them. I don't know, but it was just awful. Seriously, when I look at it, awful. It was awful.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So when Donald got in trouble with, the murders at the La Quinta,
Mhm.
when did you hear about that, and what was going through your mind when you heard about that?
Yeah, I was incarcerated, like I said, because I did 25 years there,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I was way upstate, um, well, in the middle of the state, but I was in a prison called Five Points, and it's about 5, 6 hours from New York City from home. And I called home. So I called my sister, just, like, hey, sis, you call family members. And when I called, this was in 2001. I think it was in the summer, I'm not sure. But I called my sister just to check in. She said Donald was here, because I didn't know that. I thought he was in Oklahoma with my mother. She said Donald is here, or was here at the house, and the police came uh, and kicked in my door and got him, right? And he was with I forgot her name, some woman, right? Who, my understanding is that he committed, she didn't tell him to do it. I don't think she told him to do it, but he committed the crimes,
Mhm.
So that he could get this woman out of jail. This is showing how his mental health is not. This doesn't. I mean, people do crazy stuff, but it just doesn't make sense. But that's what it was. He admits it. I mean, I'm not making it. That's it. That she was in the. She had gotten locked up for whatever, I don't know, and he came up with this scheme to rob the La Quinta Hotel. I learned some of this stuff because I don't read his crime. To be honest, I can't read it. I've read like a few pages, like 2 pages,
Yeah.
and I couldn't read beyond that.
Mm.
Um, he committed the crime, like I said, for this, I forgot it, Lashonda or something like that, right? And it was an inside job. My understanding is that a former employee, he knew an employee who worked there, told him how to scope out the joint, what to, all this other stuff. So he planned it. He planned it. And my understanding from watching the clemency hearing is that he planned it. He didn't plan to get caught, which is crazy, but he planned it and then followed through on the plan,
Okay.
and made it to New York, was arrested, like I said, in my sister's house, I think. And the woman was with him. She claimed that, this is my understanding, she claimed that he basically, she turned states on him and said that, oh, he kidnapped me and all this other stuff. She willingly went with him. And now I wonder what she's thinking, to be honest, but that's neither here nor there. But because they are victims in the crime. So, and I want to acknowledge that.
Can you let me ask you? It's another technical thing because I'm seeing a lot of myself in the glare of your glasses.
Uh,
Can you see without your glasses?
I can, but it's harder to
Oh, okay.
concentrate.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, I tell you what.
I could
If it,
try it. I could
okay, we
try it.
try. If it gets too bad, just put them back on.
Yeah,
I understand.
yeah. Like I can
Um.
see distance, but like when I'm trying to focus,
Right. Right.
that's
Right.
when yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, um, tell me, and some of this stuff may seem a little ridiculous or obvious or whatever, but it's important to have you on camera saying it or whatever. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So what, you know, um, tell me how you were feeling when you heard the news from your sister.
Yeah. So when she told me, I mean, I was shocked. I mean, that this is like like I said, when I last saw my brother, he was 15. So now he's this is a couple years later, and well, a decade later. So he's like 25 or something like that. But to me, he's still a kid, like in my mind. So I'm like, what the fuck, man? I mean, that's what I was thinking. So I didn't know, I didn't have a lot of details. She just said, they said that, oh, he killed somebody. I don't know if she said 2 people or not. So I was like, wow. It was more shocked, like, wow. Um, and then I, I'm trying to think at what point I started learning more about the details of, yeah, I forgot when,
Yeah.
it's a blur now.
Right. Right.
Yeah. But I just was shocked. I mean, I didn't say, I mean, I didn't know that's what I felt. Yeah, just shocked.
Yeah. So, you know, tell me how you feel about your brother, man. You know. how do you feel? And this is where we get into a little deeper conversation about, you know, uh, the date that's coming and the possibility. I mean, we all have hope.
Right.
There's always a chance that, someone will step in. But with all the things that have gone on, I mean, how are you feeling about all of this?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna say two things. It's the first question you asked was how do I think you asked, how do I feel about my brother? Um, Even long before we got to this point, I have felt the fact that he's in there, like he's been there 20 years on some, incarceration, 20, 21 years. Um, I think about 15 or 16 on death row. Right. So I can't even imagine at that time. Never been, I was there, what they call the box or shoe. I've been there once and I stayed there I was kept there for a week and then proven not guilty. So I got let out. And in that week, one little week, I know people do months and years. I literally felt my mind shutting down. You talk about that sensory deprivation, it's real. It's real. Some people lose their mind. I don't think I was going there. I was writing, I had materials, but it was sensory deprivation for real. And yeah, but anyway, so I can't imagine what it's been like for him. So I say that to say what I feel about my brother. Obviously, I love him, uh, and I love him daily. I have some, not as much, but I think I still have residual guilt, survivor's guilt. I think I have guilt just in general about, and I told him this, about not spending more time with him. Uh, I was a kid myself, I explained that to him. I was older than him, but yeah, I was still a kid, and getting caught up in the streets, with the latest fashions and stuff that teenagers do. But the adult me said, damn, I mean, obviously I couldn't see. I couldn't see a year ahead, let alone 5 years or 10 years. But I wish I had it in me to when my mother could not be a parent that I could have stepped in. So I still struggle with that to this day. But how I feel about Donald is that, and I felt this for many, many years, and is that he didn't stand a chance. He didn't stand a chance in hell to really, not saying that this is predestined, I don't believe in stuff like that or predestined, but he didn't stand a chance. Every system failed him, the family system, the education system. You know, we, as far as I know, I don't know. I don't recall my mother saying that he was diagnosed with bipolar or schizophrenia. She may have said it, but maybe to her credit, she didn't bring it up. Maybe she knew and didn't, I'm guessing, and didn't want to say it so that he wouldn't seem or we wouldn't look at him as different. That's a possibility. I don't know. But clearly he had some issues that we didn't have. And so how I feel about him is that Donald did not stand a chance. Like he didn't have the supports. That when I say didn't stand a chance, I mean I ended up spending half my life in prison, right? I'm not proud of that. I commit, crimes that I'm not proud of. Yet because I don't have mental issues and because I believe, some stuff you call it luck or whatever, because I was born the oldest and wasn't subjected to being taken away to the group homes, each of them in different group homes, crying as they're pulled apart. Literally, this is what they all describe it in the vignettes that they said. I didn't experience any of that. I was in college when the stuff was happening. And although the first semester didn't take it seriously, I was in college. It was a big deal. From the projects, I'm up and now I'm on my own pretty much. I filled out my own FAF forms, the FAFSA forms or whatever. Did most of that stuff. My mother didn't help because she was abusing drugs by then. But we, got it done. And Donald, like I said, fell through the cracks. He did not stand a chance. Basically, if it wasn't this crime, it probably was going to be something else, right? It's probably going to be something else, or could have got killed because the streets, the streets are crazy, so I just feel, that it's terrible, man. It's all around terrible.
So you know, what do you wish people understood about intellectual disability? Because there's a lot of misconceptions about it. A lot of people think, oh, if the person doesn't look like they have something like Down syndrome or whatever,
Right.
they're not, they don't have an intellectual disability. We know people that,
Mhm.
can have a job,
Mhm.
have a girlfriend.
Right.
What are some of the things you wish people would recognize
Yeah.
about intellectual disability?
Well, it's real, right? It's not. I'll say this: it's not something that I per se have studied. I studied a lot. I do study a lot of psychology, not necessarily quote unquote abnormal psychology, right? Because they got all these other different fields. But I study psychology because I'm into business, and I just like the way the mind works. I like to know how the mind works, the human mind works, and so it's real. And I've learned to really see it up close with Donald, obviously, but also with some of my clients. I work at a law firm in Lower Manhattan, and some of them have, mental health issues. And they, we all make poor choices, but they
Mhm.
sometimes make really choices you like that doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
But that's the whole point. And so, what I want people to know is that intellectual disability is real. Just like how you can have a physical disability, you can have a mental disability based on the circuitry or neurons in your brain or other damage that may have been caused that may have caused the mental health. Donald, for example, I didn't know this until maybe I don't know 8, 10 years ago. And I was like I said, so I was 40 something years old when I found out all about that. When I found out that when Donald was born, my mother's umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck for a while, and it cut off oxygen to his brain. And it makes perfect sense why he was climbing in the closet, grabbing my toys, why he was hitting the TV. It makes perfect sense. But he didn't get the help. I don't recall having the hearing. I wouldn't have the discussion, but I don't recall hearing that, meaning growing up, that he needed, like special mental health treatment or something like that. I just wasn't part of the discussion. Um, but yeah, so it's sad. It's sad when I think back.
Yeah,
It really, really is sad. He didn't stand a chance.
yeah.
And he said one of the things he said. I'm gonna say it, and you can keep it in the film or whatever. And I had to wrestle with it. And I asked him again about it. He said, I was born. This is what he said. He said, I was born into the wrong family. That hurt. That cut. That hurt. That hurt. He said, I was born, and then he has his own theory. It's like, to me, that's my way of saying I don't agree with that per se, but I said, because we don't choose families like that. But is that he didn't stand a chance. That's my interpretation of that. Like I didn't, who was gonna help me? The family was struggling under the weight, this is my words, under the weight of crack and poverty and violence in the neighborhood. So I got, he didn't stand a chance. So yeah. So it's really heartbreaking. It's a real
Hey, man.
sad thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah. So with this clemency hearing, and I saw the video that you sent in
Mhm,
describing some of the stuff that you guys had to go through. I
mhm,
mean, did and I read some of I haven't read the entire 200-page clemency
mhm.
packet,
Right,
but
right,
I've read
sure.
enough of it to
Mhm.
do you think did the did the court, did they take all of this into consideration?
Mm.
you know it's hard to say sometimes, but it's like when you read
Right,
it, it's like, how can you not
right, exactly.
say, okay, go ahead.
I think no, no, no. I hear you. No, exactly. On the surface, on the face of it, you would think they say, "Oh, this is obvious," or "Let's explore this more. Let's look at this and see." my understanding is that that different judges or different doctors, maybe different or both, that some have deemed him competent to stand trial. So the issue was not whether or not he committed the crime or not. We got to start there. He admitted it. I mean, so that wasn't the issue. The issue was whether or not he was competent to stand trial. And my understanding is that different doctors gave different reports. And so he's like in some limbo, but they are leaned towards the fact that they believe the doctor who said that he is competent, right? And so this medical records in terms of the clemency, like I said, I didn't read through it all either, but it reflects somebody who has a long history of mental health issue. And yet, people can say whatever they want. Race plays a big part of this. His race and the victim's race plays a big part of this, right? There's no getting around it. And another dimension is that they were women, white women. I'm being raw. This is the world we live in. So I think all those things play a part. So in the same way, and this is not being facetious or anything, but because I know, it's a very good question about, with all this evidence, right? Science. This is science, right? Mental health. This is science, right? The doctors said, you know, have trouble in school, IQ issues, all this other stuff. But in the same way that they use the euphemism for years when you got the Scottsboro boys in Alabama and other people, other folks out in New York, all over the place, and it's still going on, where white jurors, or mostly white jurors, will exonerate a white person if they commit murder, straight up murder, lynching, all that stuff like that, and acquit them. And they use a euphemism, jury nullification, right? When we do it, it's a problem. But my point is this, to connect the dots, is that in the same way that they could use that so-called jury nullification as a tool, they could look at the facts and look away and say, at the end of the day, this is the N word. That's what they say. And he took one of ours, two of ours. That's what I think it boils down to. The facts in, I'm not going to say his name, but another person who's in there with my brother, he was, his sentence was commuted. He was on death row, right? You don't get on death row for like stealing pocketbooks and stuff like that. It's got to be something real serious. So the guy was on death row. Now he's not. His sentence was commuted. Same mental health history, not identical, but very similar to Donald. Donald's is probably worse. The difference, not surprisingly, is that he's white. The defendant is white, and Donald's not. So that's the answer to that. Like how they can do that. It's just stunning. It's just stunning. And you read about, maybe not these set of facts, but we read about the stuff, or we see it on TV and we're like, oh, that's crazy. How could they do it? Now I'm seeing it. I'm actually witnessing it up close, which is crazy, as opposed to, from a distance and watching it on the news or something like that. So now I'm and I don't get too crazy with it, but now it's really Donald, but I'm by osmosis, so to speak, and part of the story, because it is our collective story, but it's his individual story.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we see this type of thing go on and on and on. And, I dare I say white privilege,
Yeah.
Because that's what it is,
Yeah.
in a lot of these cases. And so let me ask you this, and you don't have to, I'm just going to ask you, but, we can move on. The victims in this case, their families, what are you feeling about them? if anything, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. I feel no. I will say over and over again. I feel deep sadness for them. Loss is loss. You know, they or other people could feel Donald's an animal. He's my brother. He's not an animal. So I feel terrible for them. I mean, seriously, I'm a human being. I feel, you know, I wish it had never happened. You know, not just because it's Donald who did it, but anybody. They should still be alive. That's how I feel. I mean, really. But we can't bring them back. Just like in my case, there was a victim who is deceased. Can't bring them back, right? I'm remorseful. I live out my remorse, meaning I live it, I show it, you know, and can't bring them back. And so I feel terrible for them. I want for them peace. I wish, I doubt it, but I wish that they would. I understand their anger. Let me say that their deep sense of loss. I understand. I get it totally. I've lost other family members, right? Like we all have, and it's painful. It's painful. Um, you know, my son's mother. You know, I was in prison. It's 1994. She died. You know, 21 years old. I still feel the loss today. I'm happily married. I still feel the loss. She was too young. I was young. I didn't get to see her. I was in prison. So I get pain. I feel pain. I can't say I feel their pain. I don't know them. I don't know their daughters, but I know pain. And all of us know that basic sense of loss when it comes to stuff like that. So I wish that I will say this. My hope is that they not think that by the state taking my brother's life, that they will have closure. I don't believe that. I mean, I think people sometimes tell themselves that, but I think that they will get some temporary sense of satisfaction, but they will always have memories of their loved one. So how do you have closure if you have, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I don't know. I just think that people think that, oh, when that happened, I mean, oh, we've closed the book on that. That's not the way our hearts and minds work as human beings. I have memory, we all know we listen to music, a certain song. It takes me back 30, 40 years. That chapter is not closed, it's there. It's how you, decide to deal with it, to cope with it. And I don't mean like, oh, just like suck it up. So, okay. No, I mean, that's what therapy is for. That's what therapy is for. That's what, people who are supportive and are open minded and nurturing, stuff like that. That's what that's for. But taking his life doesn't solve anything. It doesn't solve anything. That's how I feel. You know, it's just adding more pain into the into the atmosphere, so to speak. That's all it's doing. But we just add another one. You're hurting, so we'll just add another one. I mean, that makes no sense to me. And I don't mean to trivialize it because I would never do that. It doesn't make sense. People, I'm just going to say this last thing, and this might offend some people. I consider myself spiritual, right? I'm just going to preface it with that. We grew up Baptist. We went to church, up until a point. Once I became a teenager, I was, hanging out with girls and stuff. But my point is this: some people like to say, "Oh, an eye for an eye," right? Uh, and I just wonder what Bible they're reading because the Bible that I've read has an Old and a New Testament, right? Not trying to step on toes, but my point is that eye for an eye is Old Testament. That's it. How do you say I don't want to get too deep, step on toes, but people will say that they're Christian, right? So you're following Christ. So it's a New Testament we talk about where we really learn about Christ, and he wasn't about eye for an eye. So what do people get half the Bible or something like that? I mean, I don't get it. So
Yeah.
that is vengeance. That is it's not Christian in my opinion. It is not Christian. Um, What would, I'd say his last thing, what would Jesus do? Would he do that? Would he execute people? Would he be in favor of that? Seriously. I ask anybody that. Would Jesus be? Then not from my understanding. He wouldn't say, yeah, let's let the state do it. It would be the exact opposite of that. So who we really follow? So that's how I feel about that, to be honest.
Well, I I just have a couple more questions. I know I don't want to take up too much more of your time. And I know Donald may be calling you or whatever, because he told me he was going to call you.
Yeah, he did call me already.
Okay. So I'll be real brief. One, what would you say to a younger Donald? Is there anything that you think you would say to him, to a younger Donald, that may have pushed him in down a different path, or is there anything?
I think the thing is this. That's a good question. I think the reason I'm gonna answer to the best of my ability, but because the first thing that came up for me was because, like I said, I was a teenager and I was 5 years old. That was one of my rationales for not having them like tagging along with me, stuff like that. But that aside, because what I'm getting at is I wish I had the presence of mind to have like talks like big brother and little brother. We didn't have a lot of those. We didn't. That's just the truth. By the time I started becoming of age, and I babysat stuff like that up until I was maybe 15 or 16 or something like that. But by, like I said, this is mid 80s, the cracks like that. I was out mostly in the streets. I was mostly in the streets. So he was in the house, I was mostly in the streets. And then, like I said, went to college, all stuff like that. And then, they started moving around different hotels with my mother, like welfare hotels. But to answer your question, if I were present, physically and mentally and emotionally, like really present, because that's key. That's why I had to preface it with. What I would say, to be honest, is more than, this is what I've learned as an almost 52-year-old. It's more than what I would say, is what I would do. I would lead by example. I led a bad example. I followed my uncles. I committed crimes with my uncles at 16, 17. I followed them. Me and Donald, we talk about that. I'm not proud of that. I did petty crimes with my uncle and some of their friends. I was like the youngest guy in the crew. And so they were looking up to me, Donald and Lennox, and my siblings in general. They still do. But I was looking up to the wrong people. That I didn't have the examples of I'm not playing victim. That's just the truth. We didn't have a lot of good examples. Most of the people in the neighborhood were single parents, and it was women, mostly Black and brown women. So you didn't see a lot of men. The men was, doing what they do, getting fast money. Some of them had some of them at work and stuff like that, but he didn't have a lot of examples. So again, the short answer is I would show more than I said. I would let him know that, the older me would say, let him know that he's loved, because I felt loved by my mother. I don't know if he did. I actually think, and I never told him this, and I don't know that I will. And we only got a few days, but I actually think that Donald was seeking and committing this crime for this woman. I think, one, he didn't have a lot of female relationships, like I was one that I did, my brother Sean did, Lennox did. He had maybe a few. I learned later because I wasn't around him. And I think he fell. I think he's a really interesting person, and that, and I'm saying this, I hate to say it, like with distance and that sense of remove and stuff like that. But in these last several months, we really been, as they say, going deep and talking about this stuff, about a lot of stuff. So I got to see his psychology and stuff. And he, unlike me, I'm a person who I like to think has balance between my heart and my head. Donald, I don't think has balance. I think because of and I'm not trying to sound poetic here, but because I really believe this, what I'm about to say, because of his mental or intellectual disabilities, I think he relied on his heart. He is fueled by his heart, by passion. It's not now, passion can be good or bad, right? Passion, we saw on January 6th last year, we saw what passion could look like. It could look like that. When we think of passion, though, most of us think, oh, love, this and that. But he's real. I think, to be honest, I think he has both. That's where the bipolar comes in. So that I think that he committed this crime to get this woman, his girlfriend now, to prove to her how much he loved her, I guess, and all this other stuff like that. And actually, he was, yeah, and I think he did it because he was yearning for my mother's love. That's what I really believe. That she whipped his ass so much, this and that, and when this woman was older than him, I think by several years. And my mother told me before she passed away, we used to talk about it. And she said that she was in other words, she abused drugs. My mother believed that she abused drugs, and that not that doesn't make her a bad person, but that she abused drugs like crack. That's what I mean, like that. My mother said, "Oh, I recognize this. I recognize it." And she was a bad influence on him. And I used to tell him about her. That's what she used to tell me. And this woman, I think, was much older and wiser, like street savvy than maybe not as street savvy, but because he's pretty street savvy. But my point is, I think he committed it for love. He said it during the documentary. I mean, not the documentary, during his clemency hearing. Now, who says that? Who does that? It's on death row. He broke down crying. I don't know if you recall or if you watched it, but he said, I thought she loved me. This is what he said about the woman who he committed the crime for. And he started crying a little bit. He said, I thought she loved me. I mean, I've never, I went to a clemency hearing. It was not, I wasn't on death row. I went to what they call parole hearings. I know thousands of men who I've talked to over the years when I was inside. None of them said, I thought she loved me. So that's what I say when I say about being ruled by his heart. There's no balance there, though. It's good to have a very good heart, not to the extent that you would. And I'm not being funny here. That you would do something like this, but that he has a good heart. So if you ask, what do I want people to know, is that, believe it or not, despite the crime, he is a passionate, loving person. Who also has intellectual disabilities. And you can have two qualities in one person. And we're like that. We have contradictions, he's no different. The difference is that he didn't get the help that he needed. And the state is not looking at things in its totality, like you said, and it is focused on the crimes and his race and the race of the victims. That's what I believe.
Oh, well, those are all the questions I have, man. There's just a couple of things I want you to do to say for me so I can edit them into some of your answers. When we were talking about the victims and the victims' families, you referred to them as them. And I wanted to get you to just say victims and victims' families, because I can edit that in there and replace it, because people are not going to hear my voice and everything.
I got you.
Yeah. So if you can just say victims and then wait a beat and then say victims' families.
I got you.
Mm-hmm.
Victims' families.
Okay. Now say it in the context of, I feel bad for the victims and the victims' families.
I got you.
Yeah.
No, I got you. Yeah, because I don't want to dehumanize anybody. Yeah, I feel bad about the victims and the victims' family.
Great.
I could say more. I mean,
well, if you want to, the last thing I was going to ask you is if there's anything else you wanted to add. So you can say more if you want.
Yeah. I really wish that those who view this can really see the humanity, not only in my brother, but the humanity in every human being, basically. In other words, that I believe that no one is a monster, that some of us commit uh, crimes or hurt people. It doesn't have to be a crime, but that we hurt people in different ways. But that there's redeeming qualities in all of us. I really do believe that, right? That people are not like dregs of society or rubbish, that you just get rid of them. I just do not believe that. We may not like some people's thinking or their behavior. I mean, I certainly don't, to be honest. I'm always trying to grow and become the best me, for example, because I believe we're all imperfect. And so I personally do not believe that uh, anything is really accomplished by taking my brother's life. I do not believe that. At the same time, I my heart goes out to the victims, both the victims, and my heart goes out to the victim's family. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Even if it wasn't my brother, I would feel that way, no matter what the crime is. I believe all crime causes some type of pain. It could be financial, it could be emotional, it could be physical, it could be mortal, right? So I don't believe in any crime. In an ideal world, we would have no crime, but we don't live in an ideal world. We don't live in a utopia. That's just not the world we live in. We all want for that, but that's just not the world we live in. I just ask that people have it in their heart to really question their thinking about some of these issues, especially as it relates to systemic racism, intellectual disability, the death penalty, life without parole. I mean, think more deeply about these issues. That's what I would want for anybody who's watching this, to just think more deeply. Not even whatever you may think about. My brother, his crime, me even, to be honest. Just think deeply. Like we don't want to be superficial thinkers, right? Where we accept what we hear on any just media or what, especially social media. Social media is the worst, to be honest, right? Because it all is about appealing to our basis, feelings. And often we're being manipulated. So think deeply. That's what I want for everyone. With that, I say thank you for allowing me this opportunity.
Oh, thank you very much, Joe.
Mhm.
And like I said, man, I'm committed to doing whatever I can to help in this fight. Your family ever need anything, reach out to me.
All right.
And I'll be praying for your brother and your
Mhm.
family. And I
Mhm.
appreciate your time, man.
All right. All right. Thank
All
you.
right.
We'll be
All
in
right.
touch.
All right,
Take
brother.
care.
Take it
All
easy.
right. Take
All
care.
right. All right.